Welcome to my channel. I'm the Dark Lord of Optics, and what I bring you here is a thinking man's take on guns and optics with occasional forays into politics. Thank you for being here.
Quick look at the Dedal DHF 520 by 56 Riflescope. Company is called Dedal-NV, D-E-D-A-L. It is a Russian Riflescope company. This is the only one of the products I have seen, but it is generally well recorded. It is currently sitting on my Voodoo 17 HMR, and it's mostly here for demonstrative purposes. I'm done shooting with it. I'm about to take it off and ship it back, and I just wanted to kind of go over a couple of things I liked about the scope and a couple that I didn't. The biggest, overall it is a nice scope, right? So it's a couple of $1,000s, I think, and optomechanical, I think it is competitive in that price range. It's not a Schmidt & Bender on a budget, but it is a nice scope. There are a couple of things about it that are interesting and that I think are worth pointing out. When you first look at it, the first thing you point out is that here, down here, there is this weird tumor-looking thingy, and that is a battery compartment. This uses a AA battery that goes in transversely and provides pretty good illumination to the reticle, and at pretty good power for quite a long time, which is a good thing. But the reason I'm showing it to you in this exact configuration is that, to me, it seems to appear to limit significantly the mounting options. Right? This is a perfectly standard bolt-action gun. Roughly the size of a Remington 700 action. That's how Voodoo makes their actions. I have it sitting in fairly high rings. Remember, it's a 56mm scope, and there is a good amount of space under the barrel. And these rings are not quite high enough. So I had it sitting on a different gun that was using a riser. So on AR-style guns, on chassis-style guns where the scope sits higher, this will work well. Otherwise, you basically have to have a very heavily adjustable cheek piece, because these are fairly high rings and they're not quite high enough. The scope needs to sit higher. Huge deal? No, something to keep in mind. The turrets are very good. Really unusual for this price range, and some people will like it, some won't. Both of them are covered. The turret does have zero stop. It does have really nice clicks. Let me see if I can get it under the microphone. The click quality is absolutely excellent. There is zero stop. It works well. One click is 0.1 milliradian, and it is 10 milliradians per turn, perfectly standard. There's not that much knurling. The turret is a little bit slippery. Resistance is pretty good, but it works. No problems there. And windage is the same thing, just no zero stop. The two turrets have very similar level of effort to each other. Here they are covered. So this is what it normally looks like. I'm somewhat ambivalent on this, so my preferred configuration for most precision-oriented scopes I use is to have an exposed elevation turret with zero stop and either covered or locking a windage turret. And this scope, basically, I can just take off the cap from the elevation turret, leave it off, and run it that way, and it's configured just fine for me. My only, like I said, real complaint is that I could use a little more knurling on the elevation turret, because I end up spinning it fairly frequently. The turret in this reticle is basically half a MOA based mill scale reticle, so you do end up twisting the turret a lot. It's not a 3 reticle, which is fine. But like I said, from that standpoint, it worked quite nicely. The eyepiece, for when you want to adjust magnification, the whole eyepiece rotates, kind of like you do on Night Force scopes. Like I said, the scope is 5-20 with a 56mm objective, which is a little bit unusual. Rotating eyepiece, not my thing, just like on a Night Force, but that's a personal preference. It's neither good nor bad, just something to be aware of. The eyepiece focus is of the fast focus variety, but not too fast. I actually had a very, very easy time dialing correct, setting correct reticle focus, so that worked very, very nicely. Side focus parallax, Fairly light, but I didn't see much hysteresis. There's just a little bit of hysteresis, meaning when you adjust from close distance to infinity, and then go back from infinity to close distance, looking at the same object, you end up at two slightly different settings. That's not very unusual in even scopes that don't have it to start with. Usually end up developing that same basic artifact after they've been used for a while. There is kind of this eccentric groove in the turret that gets rubbed a little bit every time you use it. And over time, as it wears in, most side-focused turrets develop a little bit of hysteresis. Not a big deal. Me personally, so there are numbers here on the... let me unlock this to show you. There are numbers here on the turret, so if you're trying to reference the numbers, it's going to be a slightly different number, whether between going from far to close and from close to far. Illumination is a push button, which a lot of people seems to like nowadays. I'm somewhat ambivalent. I generally prefer rotary knobs. On hunting scopes, I don't mind the push button because it keeps the whole assembly reasonably well contained. But I'm neither here nor there on that. It works fine. This scope is probably light enough. It's not that small, but it is probably light enough to be used as a crossover scope should you so choose. And with covered turrets and push button illumination, that's not a bad way of setting it up, but your hunting rifle has to have the means of attaching an optic that is tolerant of this whole battery assembly, right? But I suspect one of the reasons they were able to keep the side focus turret so compact is that the battery is not here, right? The battery is back here. What else can I tell you? Optical quality. Optical quality is very good. The scope is sharp, it is forgiving, it has good depth of field. It is probably the most ambitious optical design I have seen to date, but I don't mind because it is executed really very well. There's really only, I guess, two knocks on this thing. One is that the field of view is comparatively narrow. It is on a narrow side of average. And two is that the reticle, at least in this particular scope, is not perfectly centered. So the reticle is a kind of a floaty mill scale thing without thick bars on the outside. I'll show you a picture through the reticle momentarily. And when you go up to high magnification, when it reaches the sides, you can see that it's not perfectly centered. It's a couple tenths of a milliradian off. Is it a big deal? No. Is it indicative of assembly problems? No, honestly, also no, because I've seen it on more than once on different Riflescope designs. But does it mean that the point of aim, point of impact is going to shift? No, that actually doesn't have anything to do with it. It is really common, and we see it right now on dual focal plane reticle designs. It is really common for the front focal plane reticle centering to change as you dial magnification, right? As you go up and down in magnification, where exactly the center of the reticle in the field of view will change slightly. A low magnification, you don't see it. So what most manufacturers do, they really tune it to be dead on at high magnifications where it's really obvious. And as you go down, it may not be perfectly in the center, and you just won't notice if you're not looking for it. If you're looking for it, you can measure this kind of stuff. But that's honestly not that important in my opinion, and really not as critical. Yeah. So that is largely that, sort of a short overview, and you're about to see a look through the scope to get you an idea of the reticle. Overall, I like the design. I hear good things about the manufacturer. I've seen nothing else from them. Will I go rush out and buy one of these? Probably not, and the basic thing is that I don't like this battery compartment, and I could use some other reticles. The reticles they have is perfectly usable, but I think within modern scopes, there are reticles I prefer more. I generally, in scopes like this, prefer tree-type reticles. If they introduce a tree-type reticle, would I change my mind? Yes, very likely, because for a lot of guns that I use, like precision ARs and stuff like that, the battery compartment is not really an issue. And with a better reticle, I think optically and mechanically the scope is very nice, and a covered turret is kind of not a bad thing at all. But for example, in a gun like this, the way the scope is positioned right now, it's a little bit too far back for me, but I can't move it forward. It's already coming into contact with the rail. And if I move it back off of the rail, then the bolt cannot come out, right? Now, on the gun that I use the most for hunting, the fixed by Q, this would not be an issue, right? Then I can set it up any way I want. So there are plenty of options. But for more traditional looking bolt actions, this is not an ideal design. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Overall, given that I've never seen anything from this manufacturer before, I kind of like this.